Hello there, and welcome back. Today, I thought we might take a little trip down memory lane with one of my all-time favorite nostalgic foods, sloppy joes. Now, this is probably going to be a little more in-depth than you're used to with a sloppy joe, but I bet you'll be able to do it. So let's get to it. And for your convenience, here's the ingredients. Sloppy joes! That's what we're here for today. Now, most sloppy joe recipes you see are going to have tomato sauce or ketchup or something like that in it. But I think I'm going to roast my own tomatoes just to bring it up a little bit. It's not hard. I'm going to show you how. Just to really make sure that everything we're doing in this is a little bit elevated but still not too complicated. And to do that, I'm going to take 2 beefsteak tomatoes, cut them into quarters, and roast them in the oven. I'm just going to go ahead and cut these into quarters, super simple like. And then that little top part, where the stem was connected, just give that a little slice off. And I'm going to do this to both of the tomatoes, and we'll put some olive oil, salt, and pepper on them and give them a little roast. These guys on a sheet tray. Give them a little olive oil. You could use vegetable oil or whatever else you want. I just have olive oil. A little bit of salt. And a little bit of pepper. And just make sure you got olive oil all over it. I'm going to lay these skin side down so as they roast, this intermediate part is what's actually roasting. And what this is going to do is help increase the flavor of our tomatoes, but it's also going to make them soft. And then when they're done, I'll be able to peel the skin off so that we don't get chunks of skin in our sloppy joe. There you go. It's that easy. Then I'm just going to preheat my oven to 375 and put them in for about 20 minutes to start with. But I'm just going to keep checking them and see where they're at. And while we're waiting for those to cook, we can go ahead and start in prepping our veg. I've got a sweet onion to put in this. You could use other onions. I just enjoy the sweetness of the sweet onion because it helps break up some of the heat that's in this because it has a jalapeno and a bunch of other things in it. I only need half my onion, so I'll save the other half for some other project. Go ahead and get that skin off. Give that a little slice into the onion. Being very careful not to cut myself. If you're not familiar with doing this, maybe don't, because it's really easy to hurt yourself. Give that a cut down the edge. Get these ready to be into small little bits. And then just cut that into a nice dice. Nice little pieces. Be perfect for what we're trying to do. I'm going to get my bell pepper going. Pop the top off. And I only need half of this, so I'm just going to take one little cut off the side like that. And then the top of it. That should be enough bell pepper for what I need. And I'll save the other half for something else, just like I did the onion. Go ahead and cut these into kind of a rough chop or dice. Julienne this first part of the pepper. Then take those little julienne pieces, bunch them together, and cut those into nice little dice pieces. Not so hard. Move on into jalapeno time. Just going to take that top off and try and save some of it. I can already tell I got a spicy one. Cut it in half. Do my best to get this core out. If you don't feel comfortable using a knife for this, you can use a spoon or fork or something. It's pretty easy to get out. Just be careful not to hurt yourself. Little fun fact about peppers, it's not the seeds that are actually hot. It's this little vein that connects the seeds to the outer layer, this like membrane. There's a name for it, I can't remember what it is. But that's where the heat in a pepper is stored. So the more of that you have in a pepper, typically the hotter it's going to be. So if you want a less spicy jalapeno, just scrape some of that off, but I'm going to leave it because I like a little heat. And a little julienne bits, do the same thing I did with the bell pepper. Cut those into nice diced pieces. We're going to be sauteing these later, so they don't have to be absolutely perfect. They're just going to shrink up and get a little goofy. Put those together. Got a nice little chop. The jalapeno's done, so we can go ahead and cut our garlic. Cut these ends off, give them a quick smash. Give all these a mince. I say it in every video, but be really careful with little things like garlic and shallots, because it's really, really easy to cut yourself and take the tip of a finger off or something. Just go slow if you have to. Give this a nice dice or close to a mince. Again, none of this has to be perfect. This veg especially is just going to get sauteed later. You just want it to be good enough. That'll work. That'll work for what we're trying to do. Alright, the veg is cut. Now all we gotta do is wait for our tomatoes, then we can move on to the next step. And for that, we're gonna need a large mixing bowl and some kind of smashing implement. You can use a potato masher, a fork, a wooden spoon, a spatula, whatever, as long as you're gonna be able to smash the soft tomatoes into kind of a puree. You could also use a food processor if you have one, but they're going to be really easy to smash. There's no reason to dirty up a whole piece of equipment for something this simple. So I'll see you in a minute when the tomatoes are done. So that took about 30 minutes on the dot. Now they've got some nice color, not a whole lot of char, but a nice little bit of browning. I've let them cool off for about 5 or 6 minutes just so they're easier to handle. I've got gloves, so I could have done it right away, but if you're using your bare hands, they're going to be hot when they come out of the oven, so be careful. Now all I need to do is pick them up, grab the skin. The skin should peel right off. Now I'm going to do this part over the bowl so I don't lose any juices. Then we'll give them a little mash when I'm done. These are still very hot. Now it's time to give them the old mash. Actually really easy. They're super soft, so this should take just a minute or two. You just want to make sure to try and incorporate it. The meat of the tomato, I guess you'd call it, is going to be a little harder to mash up and incorporate, so just take your time. Try and get it as smooth as you can, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Again, you could use a food processor for this if you really feel the urge to do it that way. You'd get a better puree out of it, but a bowl and a potato masher or a spoon or something will work just fine. There you go, simple as that. No need to use canned sauce or ketchup when you could just as easily roast some tomatoes and make your own little puree. Just go ahead and set this aside and we'll be back for it in a minute. And before we start the cook portion, go ahead and get your dry seasoning ready to go. And your liquids whisked together and ready to cook with. We've got our prep done, we've got our liquids ready, we've got our dry seasoning ready, we've got all of our veg cut, our tomatoes roasted and pureed. It's time to move over to the oven. And for this next part, we're going to want to saute our veg first before we start cooking the meat and combining everything. And to do that, I'm going to pop my oven on a medium to medium-low heat, depending on your oven. Add a little vegetable oil, bacon grease or olive oil, whatever you feel like using. And I'm going to wait for this to heat up until it starts to shimmer, which if you don't know what to look for in an oil when it's hot enough, it'll start to look kind of wavy, almost like it's got ripples in it, and that's usually how you know it's hot enough to go ahead and add your ingredients to it. I can see it shimmering. We're going to add the garlic and onions first. Grab your most trusted paddle. And we're going to brown the garlic and sweat the onions a little bit. We don't want them to caramelize completely, we just want them to sweat some and get a little of that moisture out. These guys will take just a couple minutes. My onions are a little soft, the garlic's a little brown, time to add the bell pepper and the jalapeno. Give those a little stir. And I'm sauteing these just to bring out some extra flavor and make them a little less bland. You could add them straight into your sloppy joe, but I think sauteing them is going to give it a little better flavor and just enhance it a little more. And this part of the saute will probably take, I don't know, 5 or 6 minutes. So my garlic's getting a little brown and my veg is starting to get soft. So I'm going to go ahead and just take this off the heat and add it to my tomato puree. Go ahead and give your pan a little wipe down, and then we'll be ready for the meat. And we're going to oil the pan for our meat with our favorite ingredient, bacon grease. About a tablespoon just pop in the bottom and you'll be fine. You could also use vegetable oil. I just really like using bacon grease. I can see my oil shimmering, so I'm ready for the ground beef. And wash your hands after you touch the ground beef. So what I'm trying to do with this ground beef is give it a little char, because you don't want just like a boiled ground beef. You want it to have some char and some flavor. So I'm going to let this sit on this side for 3 or 4 minutes and get a little char to it, and then slowly start breaking it up and getting it in smaller chunks. If you break it up too quickly, what's going to happen is you're going to release all the moisture in the meat, and you're basically just going to boil your meat instead of actually browning it and giving it a good flavor. Don't forget your salt and pepper. I'm using a flaky kosher salt, which isn't overly salty. If you're using sea salt or something of the sort, taste a little bit of it and see how salty it is so that you don't over salt all of your food and get to the end and realize it's basically seawater. It's good to have an understanding of how strong any seasoning that you're using is, from salt to pepper to thyme to whatever it is. Break that up a little bit. Flip everything over so you can see it. I didn't char it quite enough, but you can see some of that brown color over the top of it. So I'm going to let this side go a little bit longer and get a really nice char, and you're just going to repeat that process every time you break it up. Any area that doesn't have char or is raw, put that on the heat, and then just try and get as much of that brown flavor onto the meat as you possibly can. Give this other side a little salt and pepper. Go ahead and break that up a little bit. I'm using an 85-15 ground beef, by the way. I just think it has the best meat to kind of fat ratio. The meat takes a little while to brown and really get nice. It's just going to take time. The more time you put into it, the more love you give your food, the better it's going to taste at the end. Everything's got a nice color on it now, so I'm just going to go ahead and smash up the meat in about as small little bits as I can get it. Let that brown off just a minute longer, and then I'm going to use my wet ingredients to deglaze the pan. That liquid is going to help pull up any of the brown bits that are stuck to the bottom of the pan, loosen up the meat, and then incorporate all the flavors that might be left over on the pan back into the dish. That's up to temperature. Time to add the tomato and peppers. Give that a little mix in. You're probably thinking, truly, but what about the dry ingredients? When do I add those? I'm getting to it. Now we can add our dry ingredients. So the hard part's over now. Go ahead and turn your heat down to a medium-low, somewhere in there. Cover it, and then let it simmer for about 45 minutes to an hour. You'll be ready to go. We're back. It's been close to an hour. It's reduced pretty well. Let's open it up and see how it looks. I'd say that looks pretty darn good. If you want it a little less saucy, just go ahead and simmer it a little longer with it uncovered, and some of that sauce will reduce down. But I like my sloppy joes pretty well sloppy, so I'm just going to leave it like this. I've been considering doing more of these nostalgic type videos. If you'd like to see more videos like that, go ahead and leave a comment down below. Maybe let me know what a nostalgic food is for you, and I might try and make that. But yeah, I had a good time doing this. And as I always say, if it's bad for the heart, it's good for the soul. I'll see you in the next one.